They never tell you that the moment you begin to break free, the moment you decide to refuse the chains they've wrapped around your mind and soul, you will be cast as the villain, the quiet child who absorbed their rules, who carried their secrets, who bore their unspoken expectations. That child disappears the instant you choose yourself. And in that disappearance, in that act of defiance, a strange thing happens. The very people who taught you how to live, who whispered their control into your ears, will look at you with suspicion, with fear, as if your courage is a crime. They will tell stories of you in hushed tones. They will twist your intentions. They will paint your liberation as betrayal. And yet, it is in this vilification that the truth hides. You are not the enemy. You are the one who has finally remembered that life is yours, that your mind, your spirit, your very being belongs to you, and no shadow cast by a family demon can steal it again. The silence before the storm. There is a peculiar kind of pressure that lives in the quiet rooms of a home that has forgotten how to love without condition, where the air itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for someone to make a mistake, waiting for someone to crack. In these households, the unspoken rules are more powerful than any spoken word, and the silence is a weapon. You learn early on that raising your voice, expressing a thought that is your own, or asking for what you need is dangerous, not because it causes harm, but because it disrupts the delicate illusion everyone is pretending to maintain. The walls are lined with invisible expectations, and each member is both prisoner and jailer, trapped in roles no one remembers who created. And in this suffocating quiet, you find yourself absorbing more than just words. You absorb the fear, the tension, the subtle calculations behind every glance, every gesture. It is here, in this silence, that family demons dwell, not in overt cruelty alone, but in the slow, invisible pressure to conform, to obey, to erase yourself. You might think that enduring it, swallowing it, accepting it will keep the peace. But peace here is a lie. It is a fragile construct, maintained not through love, but through compliance, through the quiet obedience of those too afraid to speak. And then, one day, something inside you stirs. Maybe it is a memory that refuses to fade, a truth too long denied, a whisper of your own heart insisting that it must be heard. Perhaps it is the small, persistent realization that life is being siphoned away in increments, in silent demands, in the expectation that you will always sacrifice yourself to preserve the comfort of others. When that stir becomes a flame, when that flame becomes action, the quiet before the storm explodes into something your family cannot control. The same people who never encouraged your voice now hear it clearly, sharply, and suddenly it seems too loud. Too wild, too dangerous. They cannot understand why you have awakened when they themselves have been asleep for decades, and so they label you as the villain, as the disruptor, as the threat to everything they have painstakingly hidden behind smiles and polite words. The silence that once protected them now becomes their fear. They sense, even if they cannot name it, that your courage is the undoing of the roles and illusions that kept them in power. And yet, as you stand there, facing the bewilderment, the whispers, the suspicion, you understand a truth they cannot see. You are not the storm. You are merely the wind that reveals it. The storm was always there, quietly raging in the form of unspoken rules, emotional manipulation, the suppression of your voice. You are not the villain because you dared to stand. You are the villain in their eyes because you refused to kneel. And there is an odd kind of clarity in that vilification. A strange validation, because when you are feared by those who have long controlled you, it is proof that you have grown, that you have awakened, that you are no longer a participant in the silent suffocation they have perfected. In the quiet moments after confrontation, when the echoes of their anger and disbelief fade, you feel a subtle, unshakable truth. The silence before the storm was never meant for you, it was meant to keep you small. But now you have stepped into the wind, and though the storm rages around you, it no longer defines you. You realize that the vilification is temporary, the misperceptions are transient, but the reclamation of your own voice, your own spirit, is eternal. And in that realization, even as they look at you with fear, even as they whisper and plot and question, you are free. not because they have changed, not because their approval has shifted, but because you have finally remembered that your life belongs to you, and nothing in the silence of their household can take that away. The mirror of blame. In families where the past dictates the present, where the whispers of generations echo louder than the voices of today, there exists a mirror that reflects not who you are, but who they fear you might become. It is a mirror they hold up not to show truth, but to shift responsibility, to conceal the cracks in their own hearts by projecting them onto the one who dares to break free. The moment you begin to resist, the moment you assert boundaries, express needs, or simply declare that you will not endure injustice silently, the reflection shifts. You are no longer the obedient child, the one who absorbs, who endures, who forgives. You are suddenly the troublemaker, the disruptor, the villain in a story you did not choose to write but are now forced to live. They point, they whisper, they assign blame with surgical precision because your awakening threatens everything they have built. The false sense of harmony, the unchallenged authority, the unspoken rules that have kept them comfortable for decades. And yet they cannot face the truth that their own silence, their own cruelty, their own manipulation created the space in which you had no choice but to rebel. In their eyes, to resist is to betray, to act is to harm, to speak is to wound, because acknowledging your courage would mean confronting their complicity, their failures, their sins, both spoken and unspoken. You watch as they construct elaborate narratives to justify their discomfort, to paint your freedom as aggression, your self-respect as hostility, and even when you do not retaliate, even when your actions are measured, even when your heart bleeds with the desire for reconciliation, they continue to see a villain where only a human being stands. The cruel irony is that the mirror they hold up is never about you. It is a projection of their own fears, their own insecurities, their own shame. And yet, living under that reflection is a test of endurance, of patience, of unshakable self-knowledge. For the longer you exist as yourself, the louder the accusations grow, and the more insistent the world around you becomes in its misunderstanding. Friends, neighbors, even casual acquaintances may begin to echo what you hear at home, not out of malice, but because the mirror has conditioned everyone to see distortion as truth. And in those moments, when isolation threatens to fracture your resolve, when the weight of their blame presses against your chest like a storm, you realize something vital. Their perception of you does not define your reality. You are not the villain because they say you are. You are the hero of your own survival, the witness to your own courage, the keeper of your own truth. Every whispered accusation, every quiet judgment, every pointed finger becomes a reminder that you have stepped out of the cycle of compliance, that you have refused to accept the role they assigned to you at birth, that you are daring to live a life they themselves were too afraid to claim. And in that daring, you find a paradoxical clarity. The more they cast you as the villain, the more real your power becomes, because only someone who refuses to be controlled can appear threatening. Only someone who dares to awaken the truth can be feared. And so, you stand, not in anger, not in defiance, but in quiet certainty, knowing that their blame, their projections, their distorted reflections are powerless against the knowledge that you have reclaimed your narrative, that you have stepped outside the mirror, that you are no longer a participant in their illusions. You are no longer trapped in the story they wrote for you, bound by the chains of expectation and obligation. The mirror may crack, it may shatter in anger, it may even be thrown at you in desperation, but you are already beyond it. And as you walk away from the distorted reflection, from the whispers that follow, from the judgments that linger like shadows, you feel an unprecedented clarity. The vilification, the blame, the false accusations, they are merely evidence of the truth you have discovered, of the courage you have claimed, of the freedom that is yours and yours alone. You are not their villain. You are simply the one who refused to stay silent in the face of generations of quiet oppression. And in that refusal lies the most profound, undeniable form of victory, rewriting the script For decades, your life may have felt like a performance you did not audition for, a story written before you were even born, with lines you were forced to memorize, with roles assigned without choice, without consent. Every gesture, every word, every silence had been choreographed by unseen hands, guided by expectations so deeply embedded that questioning them felt like blasphemy. You moved through the house like a ghost, carrying the weight of the stories your parents, your grandparents, even your ancestors had told themselves, repeating patterns of fear, control, and unspoken rules as though life itself demanded it. And then, at some point, a fissure appears. A moment of unbearable clarity when you realize that you are living a narrative that is not yours, that the lines you have memorized do not reflect your soul, that the very essence of who you are has been sacrificed on the altar of obedience. The awareness is intoxicating, terrifying, exhilarating. You feel an urgent pull to rewrite, to reclaim, to assert authorship over a life that has been dictated by others for far too long. And here lies the paradox. The act of reclaiming your story, of writing new lines for yourself, is often perceived as rebellion, as betrayal, as violence. Those who built the old script, the family demons who thrived on control, manipulation, and silence, cannot fathom the courage it takes to discard their rules, to reject the roles they imposed. They see your autonomy as an attack, your self-determination as a disruption, your very existence as a threat to the delicate illusion they have spent a lifetime constructing. And so they resist, they criticize, they belittle, they whisper, they wield guilt like a weapon, attempting to drag you back into the story they know, the story they can control. But rewriting the script is not about confrontation for the sake of conflict. It is about liberation, about stepping into the unknown with nothing but your own inner compass as guide. It is about recognizing that the power to define your life resides not in the approval of others, not in the narratives passed down through generations, but in the courage to stand before the blank page and declare, "This is mine. I choose this. I will live this." And as you rewrite, as you speak words that were once forbidden, as you make choices that defy expectation, a strange transformation occurs. The family that once cast shadows over your every move now recoils, perceiving the light of your freedom as blinding, uncomfortable, dangerous. They fear that your new script might expose the cracks in their own, that your liberation might reflect the compromises they themselves have made, the truths they have ignored. And in their fear, you are painted as the villain once more, the disruptor of peace, the one who refuses to obey. Yet this vilification is merely a sign that change is happening. It is proof that the old story, the one written in whispers, in silences, in hidden rules, is finally being challenged, that the narrative is bending under the weight of your courage, that the script is no longer theirs to dictate. You feel the isolation that comes with this rebellion, the subtle loneliness that creeps in when familiar faces look at you with suspicion, confusion, even anger. But it is in this loneliness that your strength grows, because the moment you claim your authorship, you discover a truth no one can take from you. Freedom cannot be shared, cannot be borrowed, cannot be inherited. It must be claimed line by line, decision by decision, breath by breath. And as you write, you realize that every fear they project, every accusation, every attempt to pull you back into their narrative is merely evidence that you are succeeding, that the life you are constructing is real, tangible, unstoppable. The old script may continue in whispers, in shadows, in the minds of those unwilling to change, but it no longer binds you. Your story, your voice, your choices, your freedom, they exist now, unshakable, undeniable, eternal. And so, rewriting the script becomes not just an act of courage, but an act of defiance, an act of love for yourself, an act that ensures that generations to come will inherit not chains, but the possibility of choice, the knowledge that the story of a life is never truly written until the person living it claims the pen. And in this act, as you stand firm in the face of fear, in the face of vilification, in the face of the distorted mirrors held up by those who cannot see themselves, you realize the paradox of liberation. The more they see you as the villain, the more profoundly you are living the truth, and the more unstoppable the life you are creating becomes. Rewriting the script. For as long as you can remember, your life has been written by hands that were not yours, guided by voices that demanded obedience, dictated by unspoken rules older than you are. Every thought you dared to think, every emotion you dared to feel, was measured against a standard that you did not choose, against expectations whispered in the silence of rooms you could never escape. You were taught to endure, to obey, to suppress the spark of individuality. And in doing so, you learned the art of survival, but not the art of living. And then, one day, a fissure appears in that carefully constructed world, subtle at first, a question that lingers too long, a longing that refuses to be silenced, a flicker of awareness that this life, this narrative, belongs not to you, but to generations before you who never asked if it served your soul. The realization is at once intoxicating and terrifying. You have been performing in a play written by others, following a script that never honored your voice, your needs, your humanity. And so, a choice presents itself: to continue as the obedient actor, trapped in a story not your own, or to seize the pen and begin writing your truth. To rewrite the script is no small act. It is a rebellion cloaked in courage, a confrontation with invisible forces that have shaped your every moment, a refusal to be the silent participant in patterns that demand your erasure. As you take this step, you notice the change in how the world responds. The very people who molded your story, who controlled the tempo of your life, suddenly perceive you differently. You are no longer predictable. You are no longer compliant. Your choices, your boundaries, your voice, they appear threatening. The script you are crafting is unfamiliar to them, and anything unfamiliar becomes suspect, dangerous, worthy of attack. They see only disruption, where you see liberation, only defiance, where you see self-preservation. You are cast in the role of the villain, the rebel, the one who refuses to play their part. Yet in this vilification lies the undeniable truth: freedom has a cost, and courage always provokes fear in those unwilling to face it. Rewriting the script forces you to confront not just their resistance, but your own fears, your own doubts, the lingering voice that asks if you have the right to alter what was handed to you. The answers do not arrive as whispers of permission. They arrive as a relentless insistence from your own heart that this life, this body, this mind, this soul are yours and yours alone. With each line you refuse to recite, each expectation you choose to ignore, each choice you make from your own will, you feel the tremors of change ripple through the house, through the family, through the old structures that believed they were unshakable. And it is here, in the tension of liberation, in the isolation of choice, that you realize the paradox. The more they resist, the more they accuse, the more they label you the villain, the more you know that your life is real, your voice authentic, your freedom undeniable. They cannot see the beauty of the new story, only the threat it represents to the fragile illusions they have clung to for decades. And yet, their fear is your confirmation. Their whispers, their suspicion, their attempts to undermine you. They are the shadows cast by your light, proof that the act of reclaiming your narrative cannot be ignored. You feel the weight of generations pressing down, but you also feel the wings of autonomy unfurling, the pulse of your own decisions, the rhythm of a life no longer dictated by anyone else. And so, rewriting the script becomes more than an act of defiance. It becomes an act of survival, an act of love for yourself, an act of courage so profound that even when they call you the villain, you know the truth. You are the author of your liberation, the architect of your destiny, the witness to your own awakening. In the silence that follows confrontation, in the moments when their disbelief lingers in the air like smoke, you recognize that the old story may continue in whispers, but it no longer holds power over you. You are no longer confined by roles assigned before your first breath. You are no longer constrained by fears inherited from those who refused to change. The narrative is yours to write, word by word, choice by choice, moment by moment. And as you do, you begin to understand something essential: freedom, authenticity, self-possession. These are terrifying to the unawakened, and so being called a villain is not a mark of shame, but a badge of survival, a testament to your courage, a sign that the story you are living, at long last, belongs to you. The lonely throne of courage. There is a peculiar weight that comes with standing alone, a gravity that settles not on your shoulders by force, but by the sheer magnitude of choice, the awareness that no one else will carry this burden for you. When you decide to break free from the patterns that have been silently controlling your life, when you step away from the comfort of compliance, the eyes that once welcomed your presence may harden. The voices that once murmured warmth may turn to whispers of doubt. The hands that once guided may now push or withhold. You are suddenly cast upon a throne built not of luxury or admiration, but of solitude, a throne that only those who dare to claim themselves can occupy. The world may still call it courage, may still nod politely at the boldness of your actions, but within the walls of home, within the spaces where your heart once sought refuge, courage is lonely, isolating, even dangerous. You feel the absence of allies most acutely, not because people abandon you out of malice, but because standing against the currents of family demons requires a kind of vision and strength that few can understand. They see the disruption, the refusal to kneel to old rules, and they respond with fear, confusion, even veiled resentment. And in that response, the throne of courage feels cold, unyielding, almost punishing, because it reminds you constantly of the cost of freedom. You realize that to claim your life, to defend your mind, to honor your spirit, is to step into a role that was never meant for you to hold, a role that is misunderstood, misjudged, and often misrepresented. Every conversation, every interaction becomes a test. Will you bend under their expectation, or will you remain steadfast, even as they cast shadows over your intentions? You begin to understand that this loneliness is not emptiness, but a form of power. It is the space in which you confront yourself, strip away illusions, and discover that the heart is capable of far more resilience than you ever imagined. Here, on this solitary throne, you come face to face with the true nature of courage, not as a dramatic act witnessed by applause or acknowledgement, but as the quiet, unshakable commitment to live authentically, even when everyone you know sees you as the antagonist. And there is a cruel irony in this solitude. The more you embrace your own strength, the more it appears threatening to those still bound by the invisible chains of expectation. The family who once demanded your obedience now whispers behind closed doors, tells stories that twist your courage into defiance, paints your liberation as betrayal, and casts you as the villain in a narrative you are no longer a part of. But this isolation, this vilification, this burden is the crucible in which your power is forged. You come to see that true courage is not recognized by approval, not validated by understanding, not made easier by comfort. It is a throne built from the raw material of choice, conviction, and the unflinching refusal to surrender your mind, body, and soul to anyone who would chain them. And in this realization, there is liberation. Though the room may be cold, though the whispers may persist, though the weight of misunderstanding may press against you like a storm, you feel the certainty of truth within yourself. You are the keeper of your own life, the guardian of your spirit, the ruler of a kingdom no one else can claim. And it is here, in this lonely sovereignty, that the paradox of courage becomes clear. The greater the isolation, the stronger the foundation, the heavier the vilification, the more profound the victory. The more misunderstood you are, the more undeniable your authenticity becomes. Every whisper, every judgment, every quiet attempt to pull you back into old patterns is evidence that you are succeeding, that the old power structures fear you because you are no longer theirs to command. And so you sit upon your throne, alone yet unbroken, vilified yet unshakable, isolated yet infinitely free, knowing that courage once claimed cannot be taken away, that freedom once embraced cannot be diminished, that truth once lived cannot be silenced. In this solitude, in this vilification, in this quiet confrontation with the world that seeks to define you, you discover the essence of liberation. The throne is yours, the crown is heavy, but the life you create from this seat of courage is sovereign, eternal, and unassailable. The redemption of self. There comes a moment in the journey of breaking free when all the fear, all the whispers, all the shadows of accusation fall away, leaving a silence so profound that it carries within it a truth you have been seeking your entire life. That liberation is not something given, it is something claimed. And in claiming it, you find the redemption of yourself. For years, you may have lived under the weight of family demons, absorbing the pain, the criticism, the subtle and sometimes not so subtle manipulations, believing perhaps that endurance was the only path to survival. You bore their expectations as armor, their disapproval as chains, their distorted love as a script you were bound to follow. And yet, beneath it all, a part of you remained untouchable, a flicker of self that could not be silenced, that refused to be rewritten. When you finally step into that self, the one who speaks, who acts, who asserts boundaries, who refuses to bow, you discover a paradox. The very people who once seemed to define your reality now see you as the villain, the disruptor, the threat. But in their fear, in their misperception, you find proof of something extraordinary, that the life you are building is real, that your choices are valid, that your spirit cannot be contained. Redemption, you learn, is not a gift from others. It is the reclamation of the self that was always yours, the quiet affirmation that your value is not contingent on approval, your identity is not subject to manipulation, your soul is not negotiable. And in this reclamation, you encounter the full spectrum of what it means to be human, the sorrow of isolation, the sting of vilification, the haunting memories of a past that tried to define you, and the unshakable joy of realizing that you are no longer bound by any of it. Every accusation, every shadow of doubt cast by others, every whisper that once sought to control you becomes a mirror reflecting only the courage you have claimed. You see that the villain in their eyes is merely the self they cannot understand, the autonomy they fear, the truth they cannot face. And in accepting that role, not with anger but with clarity, you release yourself from the need to be validated, from the chains of expectation, from the weight of their judgment. Redemption is found in this release, in the conscious choice to live fully, authentically, uncompromisingly, despite misunderstanding, despite mislabeling, despite the echoes of old fears. You feel a profound transformation. The trembling fear of confrontation becomes a steady heartbeat of assurance. The ache of isolation becomes a testament to your sovereignty. The vilification becomes the shadow that proves the light of your liberation. In this newfound freedom, you also discover compassion, not for the ones who sought to control you, not even necessarily for yourself in the early stages of fear and doubt, but for the undeniable reality that life has tested you, shaped you, and ultimately prepared you to recognize that the only authority over your spirit is you. And so, the redemption of self is not a sudden victory or a dramatic reversal. It is a steady, persistent awareness that every choice made in alignment with your truth, every boundary honored, every moment of courage becomes a stitch in the fabric of your restored life. It is a quiet but unshakable triumph over the years of suppression, the inherited pain, the manipulated loyalties, and the unspoken rules that once dictated your existence. You begin to walk through life with a different rhythm, one defined not by fear or expectation, but by authenticity, integrity, and the deep knowledge that you belong to yourself first. And in this walking, in this living, you encounter a profound freedom, the freedom to feel without guilt, to love without compromise, to dream without constraint, to exist without apology. The redemption of self is not just personal, it is transformative. It changes how you engage with the world, how you navigate relationships, how you perceive obstacles, and how you measure success. You are no longer a prisoner of the past, No longer a player in scripts written by others, no longer the subject of stories you did not choose. You are the author, the guardian, the hero of your own narrative, and while they may continue to see you as the villain, the truth remains untouched. Liberation is yours, autonomy is yours, self-possession is yours, and nothing can diminish the life you have chosen to claim. In the end, the redemption of self is the ultimate triumph over fear, over control, over invisibility, over every family demon that sought to define you. It is the irrefutable proof that even in the face of misunderstanding, even in the shadow of vilification, even in the silence of isolation, the human spirit can rise, reclaim its sovereignty, and declare with unwavering certainty, I am mine, and I am free.